I'm Beverly, and I'm on the witness stand. Okay, everybody, we have got a lot to get to tonight, and I'm going to try to hit it as concise as I can. We're going to hit the whole week of the Karen Reed trial and just give you some highlights because the jury has gone home after not reaching a verdict yet, but they've only had it today, and in a trial this long, it's going to be a few days. I believe that's my take on it. Okay, so let's start with Monday. It was the battle of the experts, and I have taken so many notes, so I'm going to be referring back and forth. We had Dr. Laposada. She was really qualified, but she gave testimony that said that John O'Keefe's head trauma was from falling backwards onto a rigid surface, not struck by an SUV. A cut above his eye, I think we've talked about that before, that could have possibly come from a fist. And you know that the defense has been saying all along that there was a fight in the house and that the crime happened in the house, potentially in the garage. So this lines up with their theory. The prosecution response came back and said that they exclude. Laposada also said that the injuries came from dog bites, but then the prosecution came up and objected to that, saying that that couldn't happen. They didn't want her testifying anything about a dog bite, saying that she wasn't qualified, even though she had done approximately 50 or so autopsies that included, bites that appeared or were contributed to dog bites. But what they did get, and you'll hear later, is that they could say animal bites. Unless they think there's a rabid raccoon running around, I don't know. But I don't know that I go with that, but I sure can't say I go with an SUV causing those either. I just don't know. I don't know. So therefore, I can't really say either way. But then you had a private investigator named John Tedman, and he was a defense witness. He confirmed all of these measurements at 34 Fairview. And it was also challenging the prosecution's timing and their location narrative. And so why was that important? First of all, he was tasked with documenting and measuring the exterior, like I said. He mapped distances from the mailbox to the driveway, to each entry, the front door, side, all of that. He used an iPhone app and one of those rolling measuring things that a lot of surveyors and landscape people use. And the reason that he did all of that was because he was trying to help the defense challenge the prosecution's theory on where John died, or where he was struck and killed. It was about location versus surface, how far he could have been thrown versus the damage on the SUV. But what he noted was there were concrete steps, there was a rigid surface inside the garage entrance, and tried to keep the point of impact that caused John's injuries away from the side of the road. So that was the most of that. Now I was curious to see who hired a private contractor. A private investigator, and he was hired by the defense counsel. I also heard that he was not the original one that was supposed to be in this trial, but it came out that the first one, it was no conspiracy or anything. He just became ill and couldn't do it. So Tedman came in and did the work for the defense. Daniel Wolf, another ARCA crash analyst. It was a lot. It was a lot. Again, they don't make this stuff. I don't know how the jury determines things like this, because after a while you get tired of, well, at least I did, of an expert coming in, then he goes out, you have to direct the cross, the redirect, that kind of thing, and then he leaves, then he comes back, and it goes back and forth. And so, I mean, what are you doing? Are you making notes, and then later on you'll flip back and go back to those notes? It's just, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's convoluted. It's hard to keep together and to know what and try what they're talking about, and in terms that you can understand. So again, he created this cannon to simulate throwing a cocktail glass at Reed's taillight, and it makes sense. It's just, it was a big experiment that didn't, I just don't see how you could replicate what happened. Then Brennan, here was a big one. I think we've talked about this before. Brennan, I don't know if we have or not, but if we haven't, this is what happened this week. Brennan asked Dr. Wolf about the holes in the back of John's hoodie, because he held up the hoodie, and it was a big issue, because the defense immediately went ballistic and wanted a mistrial, because it turns out that the holes that Brennan, in the hoodie that Brennan held up, was made by a forensic analyst. Whatever she found there, she cut around it, and that's what made the holes. And so they asked for a mistrial, and then prosecution got up and said that, the defense said that Brennan did it on purpose, but then the prosecution got up and was like, I apologize, I made a mistake, but what I think would be better is that you give an instruction to the jury that was incorrect. Tail between his legs, he goes back to his little table there, and the judge said it was Judge Bev denied the mistrial, but then gave the instruction, and so all is well in the Karen Reed kingdom. Monday, who won? Defense definitely takes the win on that one, because they threw cold water literally on the crash theory, and then that prosecution's big mistake with the holes in the hoodie, and the prosecution did no favors for themselves. They had lots of holes in their case. So Tuesday we get to experts. Again, Laposada goes back on there. She doubles down, saying that his injuries were consistent with a back fall on a hard surface. She added that arm wounds likely came from animal claws, not the car. So then we have Dr. Andrew Rentschler. He is a biomechanical engineer at ARCA. Doesn't he sound smart? A biomechanical engineer? Really smart. Okay, so the defense had Rentschler saying that it was impossible for O'Keefe's skull fracture and light arm abrasions to match a brush with Reed's SUV at 24 miles per hour. He said it was a no-go on the collision. Prosecution came back and said, why didn't he analyze small taillight shards that was left at the scene, or consider O'Keefe's clothing materials? The big thing here was that Karen Reed says that she is going to decline to testify in her own trial. Well, I don't think there's any reason to, because she already did in her documentary, so I don't see that that's necessary. Okay, so who won Tuesday? I would say that the defense did. I think they chipped away at the collision theory, and they put in some alternative injury explanations, the animal bites, that sort of thing, and the falling back on a hard rigid surface. But Reed not testifying, I don't think it's gonna do anything for the jury one way or the other. I think most defendants don't testify, and like I said, she already has. So Wednesday, the final showdown. Rentschler came back. He asserted that O'Keefe's arm abrasions and sweatshirt holes didn't match up with an SUV collision, and he walked the jurors through the ARCA crash test, pitting expected broken bones and shattered taillights against what was actually found. So key observations. He said that 4,000 pounds of force from a taillight impact would have broken bones, and the x-rays showed there were none. And this was interesting because earlier an accident reconstructionist testified that there had not been any x-rays taken, and I thought that was really odd because x-rays should always be taken in an autopsy, when especially in a case where there's an unknown reason for that death. So Lapisato made the comment that there had been x-rays taken and that there were no broken bones, and the x-rays were shown. So big one. Another key point here is that the sweatshirt defects and the abrasions recorded don't match up. So, but he stood firm on his assertions that, no broken bones, no fragments, no damage from an SUV to his body. And then the defense accepted that this was their final witness. The prosecutors chose not to put on a rebuttal. I thought that was unusual, and defense rested their case. So who won Wednesday? Defense definitely dominated on Wednesday. Rentschler left no doubt that the physical evidence didn't support a car strike, and with no rebuttal coming, that's it. So we move to the next phase. On Thursday, there wasn't really any trial. Not trial, but there wasn't any jury there. It was all discussing what the jury, or making any kind of other decisions about how the jury were going to get their instructions, the wording, that sort of stuff. So Thursday wasn't that big of a deal. I would say that what we did find out Thursday was the closing remarks each were going to be given 75 minutes for it, and then the judge would give their instructions to the jury, which were going to be long. So anyway, then Friday, which was today, we did the closings. So let's start with the defense. Again, this was a long one. So I'm just going to hit bullet points on it, and that's it. Alan Jackson opened up with these words. He was brilliant in his delivery. He was clear, he was bold, he was confident, and here it is. There was no collision. Simple, to the point. He said that if Karen Reed's car had hit John, there would have been so many more injuries, and there would have been so much more damage to her car. Pretty much that's it. He said that the state's version of experts and everything that was testified to was just junk science. The investigation was compromised. He said that Canton Police Department didn't do what they should do to investigate. They didn't cordon off the area. They didn't do anything. They just left the scene not monitored. But the biggest thing there was the detective, Michael Proctor, who said that he was more interested in protecting his friends than finding out the truth. He said that the investigation was a fix from the beginning, and that all came down to the text messages from Proctor, which we've talked about before, were so bad. And he said there was no search warrants for the inside of the house, no blood testing inside of the house, no phone dumps from the people inside of the house, nothing, which is a good point. He talked about those misogynistic texts, bragging about Karen's arrest, calling her those horrible things, and saying things about her health that were just horrific. And then there was a place in those texts where he called Karen a whack job, and he said you weren't told about those text messages in the prosecution's case, were you? And no, it wasn't. The prosecution didn't bring up Proctor this time, which I was really surprised that the defense didn't bring him in for testimony. But they didn't. They just used it for the closing, which was probably another good decision. Anyway, they gave an alternative scenario, which was a physical fight in the house. And again, he said, there was no evidence shown at all because the Canton Police Department didn't go looking for any. He laid out how John may have gone inside the house that night, gotten into an altercation with possibly more than one person, and never walked out alive again. He reminded them of the injuries, the black eyes, the cut nose, the arm wounds, none of that matched a car accident. He floated the dog bite theory again. He pointed to statements from a vet tech about injuries that looked like puncture wounds. And even most damning was that John O'Keefe's shoe was off, which it was. You remember, it was found that he only had one shoe on. And he said that his phone had moved after the time that he supposedly died, and that there's no camera footage or eyewitness accounts placing him outside until 6 a.m. Yeah, that is interesting, but then you have to ask yourself, if he didn't get out, if he wasn't out there until 6 a.m., then how was he covered in that much snow? Because there would be footprints or some kind of prints in the snow if he was placed out there at 6. So I don't know if I can buy that. And then he questioned the prosecution's evidence. He called out the taillight fragments, saying that the chain of custody was sloppy and that it could have been planted after the fact. He talked about the Google search, with the Haas lung to die in the cold, which we now know was, how long it took. That was Jen McCabe that had done that. And he said it was glitchy, a half-type mess with no contacts, and appeared after Karen's phone had been opened while she was frantically trying to get help. We'll talk about that later in the prosecution's part. He pointed to David Butler's testimony, which questioned the injury timeline, said that that none of the prosecution's expert witnesses could pinpoint when or where the fatal injuries occurred, and said reasonable doubt was all you needed. He said it's not a whodunit. This is a you can't prove it. That's like a Johnny Cochran thing, right? It's not a whodunit. This is a you can't prove it. And he said you don't have to fully believe that in Karen's version. You just have to believe that the state didn't prove their version. And he ended with a big one. He said, find her not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. And then he looked every juror in the eye. He was not shouting. He just calmly walked away. So that was the closing for the defense. Now, the closing for the prosecution was she was drunk, she hit him, and she left him to die. Karen Reed was intoxicated, reversed into John Keefe, left in her Lexus SUV, abandoning him, and he said, "It's that simple." And then, of course, he walked through the whole data about putting the car in reverse and where he was found, and he made the act seem like it was straightforward, reckless, and undeniable. When he talked about her being intoxicated, it came out that her toxicology results indicated that her blood alcohol level was between a 0.14 and a 0.29 around midnight, way above the legal limit, which is 0.08. She was legally impaired when she was driving, and if you remember, if you watch the documentary, she said she wouldn't have gotten up on the freeway or the highway or expressway, I think she called it. They said she wouldn't have gotten up there driving, and she definitely shouldn't have been driving. So even by her own admission, she was drunk driving, which goes to one of the charges, that she was drunk driving and killed John. But you still have to believe she killed John or she hit him with the SUV in order to get her on that charge. Okay, then they talked about the tail light plus the body location equals the collision, and said that the taillight fragments that were left where O'Keefe's body was found was directly tying it to her vehicle, and said it left her signature at the scene. And then in the documentary where she gave her own words and said, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Or I think she said, did I clip him? She made those comments of her own, which is kind of like testifying, right? And so he brought that out, and he argued that those weren't expressions of confusion, but admissions that she knew or suspected she'd struck him. And he said her nonchalant buffalo on a prairie description, I think that was in the documentary too. I think it. Her own words, could I have hit him? He played clips from Reed's interviews and voicemails, including her comments. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Did I clip him? I think that part was in there too. So he brought that up, and he said, I like this part. I mean, for the prosecution, I thought this was a good point. He said that she didn't call 911. She just drove off. And he said that her indecisiveness with basic human decency, she did not immediately seek urgent help or run to the scene. She waited until others were there to make the call. I found it interesting that when she was calling him all night long, more than 50 phone calls, I think, that she made to him, that she didn't call somebody at the house to go look and see if he was out there, or call some of the other people like Jen McCabe or Carrie, I forgot what her last name was, Reeves, I think it was. Call them and say, have you seen him? Did he show up at the party? But she didn't do any of that. I thought that was really, really interesting. I think that Brennan really hit home with saying that the case was simple and focused, and that he really pulled on the jurors' emotions, because he put up a great big picture of John O'Keefe up on the screen. He talked about him being a man and not just a buffalo like Karen had called him. He emphasized John as a caring human being that cared about his duty as a police officer. And he said that, oh no, he didn't say it, but he sidestepped the Proctor testimony and his investigation, saying that they didn't need him at all because the state didn't need Proctor to prove guilt, that everything else, the experts, all the other testimony, the people, the evidence itself spoke guilt. And then he just walked away. So that was the testimony of this week and the breakdown of the closing arguments. So my question is what do you believe? How do you feel about it? Do you think she's guilty or not? The jury was given their instructions, and they got the case this afternoon. And then as of tonight, the jury went home for the weekend, and they did not come to any conclusion or any verdict yet. So we will pick back up Monday with Verdict Watch, and I will be here with you every step of the way. And for the conclusion of this case, you may step off the witness. And so the jury will pick back up on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend, and you may step off the witness stand. I'm Beverly, and I'm on the witness stand.